So, hello, everybody, and this is late night podcast editing. And I don't know if you follow me, you may know that I have a podcast at crosscuttingconcerns.com. I'll bring it up here on the screen for you. Crosscuttingconcerns.com. This podcast is one that I publish during my podcast season. I publish once a week, and episodes tend to be short, 15-ish minutes. And my guests tend to be developers, programmers, software engineers, technologists, and I bring in other types of people, usually with a focus on technology. So maybe they're interested in home automation or retro gaming, things like that. And sometimes I'll talk to people about computer programming movies or technology movies, things of that nature. So I publish every Monday, and today it is Friday, so I've got an episode I need to get edited and get it ready to go and staged to be published on Monday morning. So that's what I'm doing. One other thing you might notice new on my stream is this whole camera deal down here. I don't have a green screen. I don't really want a green screen. I might end up having to get one. We'll see. But I'm using something called Chroma Cam, which filters out the background. And it's okay. The lighting in here may need improvement. I don't know. I also have a brand new chair, which you can't really see in the background here. So I just got it from IKEA. My chair broke today, so I got a new chair from IKEA. It's called the Markus chair. So I'm also trying that out on the stream as well. It's a pretty tall chair. It's up to here, which is not what I'm usually used to. Okay, so let's get on with the podcast. So hopefully you'll be able to hear the podcast audio as I edit. And as I go as well, this is the show notes. This is just kind of a loose script that I send to my guests, but I also keep track of various links that they mention in the show or I mention in the show that I want to add to the show notes of the blog as I publish it. So as I go through and edit it, I'll make note of, oh yeah, I need to mention that, I need to find a link to that sort of thing. Okay, so to record a podcast, what I do, in best case scenario, is I record my audio, just me, during the podcast, with Audacity, which is a free tool. Right here, Audacity. This is how it's spelled. I hope that's how it's pronounced. And that records my local audio. And I also, ask my guests to record their audio locally. I don't have any sort of fancy setup or anything like that. I just say, hey, if you have Audacity or something else to record your audio locally, please record that and send it to me if you can. If not, we're also on a Skype call at the same time, so I can record, usually Skype, most of the time Skype, not always, but I can record their audio and my audio together using another tool, which is probably not really designed for this, but I use Camtasia Recorder. And I like Camtasia Recorder, if it'll show up here, because, and again, there's probably other tools for this sort of thing, but I just happen to have it installed. And it's not coming up, but it'll record my audio and the Skype audio and two separate tracks together. So that gives me a lot of flexibility if the guest can't record their audio or won't record their audio or something messes up. I have the Skype recording as a backup. And it also helps me to sync up the audio, as you'll see here when I get started. So I've got Audacity here. I'll go ahead and open. And I usually call these Matt's sides. So this is just my audio. And so, for instance, play this, and hopefully you can hear this. I'm recording this podcast on April 3rd, 2019. So I'm recording this podcast April 3rd, 2019. So that's just my audio. So you can see, if you look at it, there's these long gaps where it's the other person speaking. And my show is kind of an interview style show. So it's generally speaking, it's going to be me talking, then the guest talking, then me talking. It varies sometimes, but that's usually the way it goes. So the next thing I want to do is I want to open this Camtasia recording. And this will open in TechSmith Camtasia Studio. This is not a free tool, by the way, but it's one that I use for recording video tutorials and stuff like that. So it's a very handy tool for video editing. And for a guy like me who's not really a professional video editor, it really simplifies things. So anyway, so you can see here I've got the 2 tracks. So this one here is the top track is the guest and the bottom track is me. So I'll go ahead and export audio as. And that's in, I keep those on my D drive in podcast. And here's all the episodes that I've had so far. And we're interviewing Stephen Van Dorsen today, so I'll just call this one both, and I'll save it as a WAV file, just because that's faster. There's no reason to go through the whole rigmarole of compressing this when I'm not even going to use it. I'm just going to use it to line up the audio and toss it. Oh, I got 3 viewers here. So, if anyone's watching, would you please put something in the chat? I'm testing out Steam Labs OBS, and it's supposed to show chat on the screen, like right above me. I've got a widget here. I can just put a message myself, but it doesn't look like it's showing up. Hey, it's Dwayne Newman. What's up, Dwayne? Oh yeah, it is showing up there. Excellent. Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so that is showing up. It's got a transparent background, so I might have to adjust that at some point. It's just sort of floating out here up above me, just sort of floating. So anyway, I've got that audio export, so I can close up Camtasia. Now, if the guest wasn't able to record their audio locally, the next step I would do was I would delete my audio from this and export just their audio as a separate file. And as you'll see during editing, there's reasons I'd want to isolate their track and have both on the same track. So I got this both WAV file, so I'll drag this into here, into Camtasia. Yes, and it's going to, with a big WAV file, it's going to prompt you like this to make a copy. So I'll just go ahead and make a copy. That'll take a second to import that. So now I've got this first track up here is just me. This one is both of us. As you can see, it's kind of close to lined up already. But that's the goal right now, is I want to line up these tracks. So there might be a small difference in, a small delay in the audio. And hey, Calvin and Dwayne, would you let me know if you just make sure you can hear the audio of this podcast I'm about to play? It's showing up on the mixer, so I'm recording this podcast on April 3rd, 2019. Okay, so if you heard that, you hear that there's a slight delay, so I have to line up the audio here. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because, again, I'm not going to use both these tracks. I'm just using this both as a lineup track. Yeah, it's echoing, right, because that's the delay. Hey, Phoenix, what's up, man? Phoenix has been a guest on my show in the past, and so has Calvin. Dwayne has not yet. What's up, Dwayne? When are you going to be on my show? All right. Phoenix has done 2 episodes, I believe, really good ones. One was on Erlang, I think, and oh, geez, I can't remember the other one. Yeah, they're so good. I forgot. I forgot what they were about. Anyway, so I'll just sort of line these up. So you can see I've got this arrow tool here. I can drag the tracks back and forth. And I can I'm using the scroll wheel here to zoom in on these tracks. So I'll play here. I'm recording this podcast on April 3rd, 2019. So now you can tell that there's no echo because I've got them lined up pretty well. So those tracks are lined up, and so we're ready to go with those. So let me just scrunch those up. I'm working on a lower resolution screen. Dwayne says, I'm a Twitch newbie, learning this stuff, would love to come on the show sometime. Yes, Dwayne, you need to be on the show. It doesn't necessarily have to be about Twitch, but it could be something technology that you're really into, cool project you're working on, a cool tool you're working with, that sort of thing. I'm a relatively Twitch newbie as well. I did some streaming last year, a little bit, and I kind of got the hang of OBS, and I'm trying to do a little bit more with it this time around with the chat overlays and getting more involved in like the Fritz the Fritzoverse, if you will, on Twitch. Erlang and Elm, yes, that was the other one, Elm. I thought it might have been Elm, but I wasn't sure. I was like, is it two functional E named languages? What are the chances? But yeah, Erlang and Elm is what I had Coder Phoenix on, 2 episodes for those. Actually, I think you were one of my very first guests, Phoenix, in the very first season of Cross-Cutting Concerns. So thank you very much for helping kick that off. Okay, so the last step is my guest, Steven Van Dorsen, was kind enough to record his audio locally. Gotta fritz it up. He's got his system going smooth. Yes, I agree. He's really doing a pretty good job of getting developers involved with Twitch and teaching some people how to code. So I don't know if you notice here, but Steven sent me an OGG file, which is totally fine. I can use an OGG file. Phoenix says, guess I should do eLisp next. You know, I think you're joking, but there might be an eLisp out there. There's a billion different Lisps. So I'll just drag this OGG file in here. This is Steven's recording. I haven't listened to it yet. So we'll see, but it looks like, yeah, his is a little noisy. So let's just mute those other two here and listen to his.
Excuse me, here. Well, in the book we describe the 3 basic injections.
Yeah, he kind of warned me about this. There's a bit of a hum here. So it's kind of low. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's a very low hum. He said that as a hum coming from his headset. Emacs Lisp. Is that a Lisp that's built into Emacs, or what does that mean? I don't know. It's sometimes hard for me to tell when Phoenix is messing with me. You can barely hear that. Yeah, I can barely hear it too in my headset, but it's definitely there. And visually you can see, you know, up here, when my track is silent, it's very thin, very flat. Over here, it's pretty thick. Yeah, and you can also hear a little bit of me picked up on his side too. So we're going to try to clean this track up. If it's not usable, I can fall back to, like I said, the Skype recording. But the way we clean this up in Audacity, I think, Calvin, you were interested in this, in fact. Up to 5 viewers now. All right. Stop me at any time if you have questions about what I'm doing here, because I've been using Audacity for, this will be the 116th episode. So some things just kind of like second nature to me at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a portion of Steven's audio here that's basically not him talking. It contains just that background noise, that hum, and whatever other background noise that his recordings picked up. So I selected a portion of that sound. I'm going to go to Effect and Noise Reduction. So I selected that portion of the audio, and I'm going to do what's called Get a Noise Profile. So now I'm sort of teaching Audacity that this selection of audio is noise. And I want you to try to filter it out from the rest of the recording. It's kind of like a machine learning sort of thing. So now I've got the noise profile. Let's highlight the whole track, go back to noise reduction, and I'll just hit OK. So it's going to take a second to apply noise reduction to that track. And fingers crossed it'll sound passable enough to use in the final episode. If any of you haven't already, you can also try out the follow button, and a little animated GIF graphic sound effect should pop up. I think you guys mostly follow me already, but if you want to see that happen, maybe you can unfollow and refollow, and just test a little graphic that shows up. Okay, so noise reduction is done. So let's see how it sounds now. So you can still see it's still a little noisy there. Well, let's just try it here.
Yeah, in the end, it's all about just caching instances, actually, and this is the concept of lifetime management, as we call it in the book.
Okay, so that sounds okay. Calvin says, okay, I did it correctly then. Episode 3 was all Audacity. So Calvin and I also have a podcast, relatively new one, called .NET Bytes, which I think I'll also do a quick plug for here. Sorry, I got distracted by Twitter. So .netbytes.fm is our podcast. And I got to say, compared to Cross-Cutting Concerns, the audience for .NET Bytes has taken off at a hockey stick compared to my own podcast. I'll credit Calvin for that. He's doing pretty much all the work for this podcast. I'm just sort of showing up and running my mouth. But check it out, .NET Bytes. This is published every 2 weeks right now, and it's focused on .NET, but also C#, Visual Studio, and kind of adjacent Microsoft stuff as it comes along. This is a different kind of show than Cross-Cutting Concerns. It's not an interview show per se. It's more like a news show and a discussion between Calvin and I, things like that. Not to say we'll never have guests in the future, but right now we're just kind of building it out that way. This is kind of inspired by the Python Bytes episode, if you're familiar with that. All right, Coder Phoenix. It's a half joke. Emacs Lisp is the Lisp that the bulk of Emacs is written and extended with, okay? It'd be far more likely that I'd focus on something like org mode for planning, to-dos, note-taking, literate programming, though. So you're an Emacs guy, Phoenix? Is that what you're telling us? I know this is one of the holy wars, is like Emacs versus Vim. And the only winning move is not to play in that one. But, it goes back to tabs and spaces thing, the GIF and GIF sort of thing. All right. Dwayne says he's gonna check out the .NET Bytes, I assume. Follow it on Twitter to check it out. Yeah, excellent. And Dwayne, if you've got questions or .NET news that you want us to mention on the show, just ping the Twitter account. And another thing we do is every episode we do like a project of the week, project of the episode. I don't know. We highlight an open source project in the .NET world, and just sort of talk about it. And so if you got an idea for a project you'd like to see featured, get some more attention to it, we'd love to do it. And Dwayne says on Nix he just uses Nano, but it's pretty hardcore, man, using some Nano. I just use all echo statements and just code that way. Or I input it directly with binary. Okay, so I'm going to go with this for now. We might want to clean this up later, but the next thing they do is line up his track with that track in the middle. And I'm just going to take a guess. Well, I'll tell you what, let's listen to it a little bit to see kind of where the episode starts.
I think I first started to practice DI around 2008.
Okay, so I think that's...
Yes, it is. I'm great, thank you.
Yes, so that's that part right there. This is the first part of his audio, so I'm going to just delete this part. This is him responding to my question, asking him how he is. So let's see if that's up here. I'm recording this podcast on April 3rd, 2000. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Okay, there we go. So I kind of get an idea of where to line these up. I am mostly for the sake of org mode for journaling, task management, and technical writing, says Coder about Emacs. So maybe you can come and do another episode, Phoenix, about Emacs. I don't think we've had any episodes on my show about like Emacs or Vim or Visual Studio Code or Atom or anything like that. So that might be an interesting episode. All right, let's see if this lines up. Stephen Van Dorsen, how are you?
I'm great.
Okay, wrong one, so it goes over here, actually.
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Oh, great. Okay, so a little echoey there, so I might want to just adjust it a tad more.
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Okay, so that's probably good enough. Like I said, it sounds echoey, but it's mostly lined up. We're talking like microseconds difference. So at this point, I don't need this middle track anymore, so it's gone. I'll unmute my main track. So at this point, I should basically have the basics of the podcast here. I'm recording this podcast on April 3rd, 2019. My guest today is a freelance developer and author of Dependency Injection Principles, Practices, and Patterns. Stephen Van Dorsen, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Oh, great. Thanks for being on the show. Congrats. Okay, so there we go. So at this point now, I've got them lined up the way I want to. It's important to go to tracks and sync lock the tracks. because I'm going to do a lot of editing on this episode, and it's going to get pretty boring. You guys are probably going to fall asleep. But if I don't sync the tracks up, editing would be very, very difficult. So what sync lock can do, for instance, is if I highlight this portion of track 1, it also kind of does a shadow highlight of the other track. So if I then delete that clip at the beginning, it deletes a corresponding amount of the other track. So it keeps them in synchronized lock. I'm recording this podcast. Calvin says, I haven't used that before. Oh my goodness, Calvin. Oh my goodness. I can't believe you've not edited with the sync lock. You're going to save yourself a lot of time. Yeah, and so the way I'm editing my episodes kind of is based on, for the most part, is based on a very old article by Scott Hanselman. So if I can find it here real quick. How to start your first podcast, equipment, editing, publishing, and more. So he talks about microphones and stuff like that, which is good if you're in the hardware area. But then he goes back to editing. So he does a very similar thing. Hey, thanks for stopping by, Dwayne. You're getting out just in time to avoid the boring editing parts. But yeah, same sort of thing. So he records himself at home, his guest at home, and a phone track, combines them to final MP3. And so he uses Audacity as well. And he uses other tools for different episodes, but he goes through that whole thing there. So that's kind of where I go, kind of where I started. Okay. So now the boring part. There's a couple different schools of thought on podcast editing. One of them is to just keep it as raw as possible and basically do no editing. And the other school of thought, the other sort of extreme, is to micro-edit, micromanage the actual audio, to edit out the uhs, any pauses, any sort of thing that's doesn't need to be in the episode. And so, because I want my episodes to be very, very bite-sized and short, I go the micro-editing route. So I edit out all the ums, all the pauses, anything that someone wants to repeat or start and say over. And I also, because I want to keep them short, there's also just, sometimes I'll edit out a whole segment, like a question and answer. You know, I hate to do that, but I don't want to keep the episodes short more than anything. So I can usually find enough room in there. So if we look at the raw audio right now, everything, it fits in just over 20 minutes. So by the time I'm done editing this, it'll probably be down to maybe, I don't know, 17, maybe 15 to 17 minutes, which will be just fine. All right. So now's the boring part. You've been warned. I'm recording this podcast on April 3rd, 2019. My guest today is a freelance developer and author of Dependency Injection Principles, Practices, and Patterns. See this pause right here? I'm going to just shorten it a little bit. Patterns. Stephen Van Dorsen, how are you? Okay, this gap right here I'm also going to remove. And I can also, this button here completely removes any audio. I don't need the audio here. I don't think I noise reduced myself, so I'll do that right now too. Noise reduction, get noise profile for my own track. My audio is a little cleaner, but there's still sometimes some background noise. Furnace kicks on sometimes. I've got a computer running right next to me here, another computer over there, and I've got a hot tub out in the sunroom, things like that. All contribute to background noise, so may as well reduce the noise. Okay, now where was I? Right here. So I'll just completely flatten this out now. Completely flatten that out. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Oh, great, thanks. So his audio is still a little on the quiet side, which is fine. Towards the end, I'm going to do another thing called normalization, which will amplify the sound and level it out a little bit, hopefully. So I'm going to just try to blank out as much as I can of the noise in between.
You.
Oh, great, thanks for being on the show. Congratulations on the book. Is this the second edition of Dependency Injection from Manning? Okay, another gap here. Delete. Flatten. Manning?
Yes, it is. The book.
Okay, so that segment here, this gone. Manning?
Yes, it is. The book Dependency Injection in .NET was published, I think, 7.5 years ago, and was written by Markus. And
the more you edit this, the more you can sort of see the ums and the verbal tics as you go along.
Markus. About around 3 years ago, Mark approached me to assist him in helping to write a second edition of that book. In the process, however, our publisher decided to change the title of the second edition, which is, by the way, something I'm very pleased with. But that aside, so that's why the book.
So that's what I'm really guilty of, is saying so a lot.
Aside, that's why the book isn't called Dependency Injection in .NET Second Edition, but rather Dependency Injection Principles, Practices, and Patterns.
Okay.
A mouthful.
Okay, and so I'll edit out my little okay here. I'm kind of talking over him, and I'll just shorten this down a little bit.
Practices and Patterns. A mouthful.
Excellent. We'll call it Dependency Injection. Okay, another gap I can edit out. I can flatten out this part here. He's not saying anything. Excellent. We'll call it Dependency Injection for short, I guess.
Yes.
I want to say the whole name every time. So, say the whole
right.
name every time. So,
the book.
as a Manning author, okay. So this part here is not really adding anything, so I'm going to blank that out on his side. I can probably also edit out some of mine. I'm just kind of blabbering a little bit here. Short, I guess.
Yes.
I want to say the whole name every time. So, yeah, listen to all that. Listen to all this babbling. So, so one of these days, I want to just collect all the little bits of babble that I edit out and just make one long MP3 file where I'm just saying just to every time. As a Manning really author annoy myself, I'm
Oh.
kind of interested in a little bit of your story here. So, why are you here? So, why are you in a situation where you like dependency injection so much that you would want to write a book about it? Was there a particular project in your career where it made a big difference, or do you just really like it, or what's your motivation? What's your motivation? There's a redundancy there. Move that kid, or what's your motivation? Okay, cut out this part here. I'll zoom out a little bit and completely flatten that part there while I'm not talking. Motivation.
I think.
So I like that first Sounds very pensive, but I'll remove the What's your motivation?
I think I first started to practice.
Coder Phoenix says, if my episode sounded in any way good, this editing is why. Oh, geez. You wouldn't believe some of the raw audio from some guests. People can get, and myself included, can get flustered and nervous about it. So that's another reason I like to do editing, to make myself sound a little smarter, and to help my guests, the listeners not to be distracted by the little bits and blurbs that everyday humans, make mistakes all the time. So, just trying to make this as pleasurable as an experience for the listener as possible, and in the process, we make ourselves look better too.
Started to practice DI around 2008 or something, and back then my primary reason was because it enables testability, and later on.
So there's a long that's going to go.
Stability, and later on I started to realize that DI can actually have a prof
That one can go too.
have a profound impact on the maintainability of an application, and that's when I started doing more research and learn more about design patterns and principles and how they all relate to DI. And in that sense, the first edition of the book was extremely
A little extra there.
edition of the book was
So double was there, so I'll remove this was.
edition of the book was extremely
So there's another but if I cut that out, it's probably going to sound unnatural, so I'm just going to leave that in.
extremely influential to me.
There's another
Extremely influential to me, and with the knowledge I gained from reading actually the
There's two froms. Also, he's not a native English speaker. I think he's doing a really good job.
I gained from
But editing this also helps that as well.
reading actually the early previews of the book back in 2009. I started developing my own DI container and started answering questions on DI on Stack Overflow, and both increased my knowledge about DI as well. So I've been an
Remove that so.
I've been an active voice in the DI community for some years now, and so one thing led to another, and this eventually led to Mark asking. This eventually led to Mark asking me to help him write the second edition.
All right. A little bit more silence there.
Second edition.
Okay. Very cool. Now, DI... See, I'm really terrible at these awkward transitions, so I usually edit them out.
The second edition.
DI is... Another there. DI is all about loosely coupled code and composition, and then for you and I mean, you mentioned testability. That's a big one for me. But let's say we're coming into a new gap there for me. But let's say we're coming into a new project. The developer gap there. Those little gaps add up. The developers are not yet convinced of the benefits. What do you think? What do you think is the single best practical benefit? Maybe like a quick win that a project that a project could gain by properly using DI.
Loose coupling.
So edit this out here. Yeah, I can still hear kind of a hum on his side, so I might try some sort of low-pass filter, which I haven't really done before, so might try that later.
Loose coupling, composition, and testability are all helpful building blocks to achieve, I think, a greater goal, and which is maintainability. And this is, I think, the single best practical benefit that DI brings to the table. It can improve maintainability in a way that not many other coding styles can achieve.
Oh, sound like he
Other coding
said calling styles. Delete that.
Other coding styles can achieve.
Okay, but with maintainability. So, and I'm just trying to reinforce his point here. So edit out some of my stuttering there.
Can achieve.
But with maintainability, that's kind of a long-term benefit. I think. A good one, but a long... Yes, this is just noise. I wasn't sure what that was. Benefit, I think. A good one, but a long-term benefit. Is there a way to get a quick win by introducing DI just to start seeing those benefits? Another breath here. Just to start seeing those benefits right away. So this chair is working out pretty good so far. The IKEA Markus chair. I picked this up at recommendation of some coworkers actually, and pretty much everyone on Twitter either recommended this one or like a Herman Miller, which is like 4 figures for a chair. So I was ready to spend some real money on a chair, but not quite 4 figures. So this one's working out okay. Now it's only been, about 40 minutes, but we'll see. Fits right away.
Yeah, that's.
Calvin says $, $. Tell you what, we start making some serious bucks with that .NET Bytes podcast. Then I'll be buying all kinds of Herman Miller chairs. Maybe we can get them as a sponsor. They can send us a chair as payment for sponsorship. Those benefits right away.
Yeah, that's. I think comes down.
Yeah, a little bit of.
That's. I think.
We'll just edit out this whole part right here.
I think comes down back to the arguments you already used. Testability.
Yes. Yeah, Calvin says don't hold your breath. Yeah, I don't think a chair company is going to sponsor an audio podcast. This wouldn't make sense.
Use testability because without DI or more abstract, without loose DI or more abstract. DI or more abstract without loose coupling.
So we're about almost 4 minutes in.
Without loose coupling, there is no testability. So you need loose coupling, and DI is a really useful approach to loose coupling. So
double 2 there.
To approach to loose coupling. So I think that.
Edit out that whole part.
To loose coupling. I think that's probably the first.
Double that.
I think that's probably the first thing that that came to mind with me 9 years ago. With me.
Maybe that part can go.
Mind with me
sounds good.
9 years ago. And with most developers who struggle with testability, DI is just a great solution. So that's probably
so can go.
Solution. That's probably the single best short-term answer or short-term solution.
Okay. Blank that out. Doesn't look like saying anything.
Short-term solution.
Okay. Now, one of the most, another one of my patented transitions. I'll just blank that out and then edit this part gone.
Solution.
One of the most confusing concepts for me when I first started with DI, about the same time as you, I think, maybe a little later, was lifetime. Double was. Maybe a little later, was lifetime of the various objects in the container. Was lifetime of the various objects in the container. That part, I don't know. Just get rid of this. It's kind of was lifetime objects in the container. I don't know if that's really adding anything. Was lifetime, and I asked this question. Me just hemming and hawing some more. Was lifetime. And I asked this question of Jeremy Miller in the Lamar episode. Jeremy Miller, Lamar episode. Need to link to that. Again, distracted by Twitter. But yes, there was a Lamar episode I did with Jeremy Miller. Lamar is another DI container, a competing one. In a sense, any of them really compete. But I'll link to that one, so make sure to put that in the show notes. And I'll put it right here. And that is episode 94. Of Jeremy Miller in the Lamar episode sometime back. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Look at that. Show notes. But from a web developer perspective, which is where I come from generally speaking, could you talk about the different lifetime options when configuring a container, we're talking singleton and transient yeah, transient yeah, maybe they're bound to maybe they're bound to an HTTP request, things like that. Can you maybe just talk through that? I talk too much. Request, things like that. Can you maybe just talk through that really HTTP request, things like that? Can you maybe just talk through that really briefly and kind of help demystify that? I don't know if I need to keep any of that in the show. So I'll blank out myself here. This is probably me coughing, but I'll leave it just in case. And blank out the rest of this. They're bound to an HTTP request.
Yeah, in the end, it's all. Yeah, in the end, it's all about just caching instances actually, and this is the concept of lifetime management, as we call it in the book, and lifetime
Long and
in the book, and lifetime management is an important concept when practicing DI. In the book we have practicing DI. In the book we have a complete.
What kind of noise that was?
In the book we have a complete chapter actually on that topic.
Right. No, that's just me saying right. Gotta chime in.
Chapter actually on that topic.
Right.
On that topic.
Right.
But yeah, in the end, it's just.
It's called active listening, right here.
Topic.
Right.
Topic.
Right.
Topic.
Right.
Topic.
Right. Active listening. Practice that with my wife all the time. Yep. Yep. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm definitely listening to you.
On that topic.
Right.
But yeah, in the end, it's just.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, in the end, it's just you decide. Just you decide as developer how long an instance, a component, a class should stay alive. And so singleton.
Right,
So
we're 5
singleton
minutes.
means you cache it forever and you only use one instance through the lifetime of your application. While with transient you say, okay, I don't even care how many instances are created. Typically it means that your services are stateless. So anyone are stateless.
That little
Anyone
noise. I
needs
got
a
something
new
about that.
instance or a new sorry. Anytime anyone needs a
So he
new
messed up.
instance or a new
So I need to fix that.
sorry. Anytime anyone needs a new instance or a new sorry.
So delete that portion right there.
Anytime anyone needs a dependency on that class, we just create a new instance. And there's a whole range of lifestyles, as we call them, in between. And scoped or per request is the most obvious or a known one, which basically means if there is just one web request, we only have one instance for that request. And entity frameworks, DB context are great examples of objects that you want to typically cache for the duration of a single request. They are not thread safe, so you don't want to reuse them, but you don't want to have multiple instances for the same request, because when you make changes to one object and then call save on another instance, yeah, the changes of the first are not persistent. So that's why one reason why you want to persistent. That's why one reason why.
Get rid of that part, I think.
That's one reason why you want to cache.
This is kind of loud here, so I think I'm going to actually this is like a big spike here. That's going to affect when I go to normalize it, so let's see if I can't knock that down just a little bit. There we go. I just amplified with a negative value.
That's one reason why you want to cache components or classes for a certain duration, and that's the concept of lifetime management.
Yeah, and that was an example that was brought up in that It was almost the identical example that was brought up in the Lamar episode. So I kind of have to make this decision here. Do I want to link the entity framework to go deeper into that in the show notes? Probably not. I don't know if it's really worth it to go down that rabbit hole just for dependency injection. So leave that to the users to go, or the listeners to go find out what entity framework is.
Lifetime management.
Yeah, and that was an example that was kind of explained here a little bit as well. It's worth repeating, I think. So from my point of view, like this doesn't belong there. Worth repeating, I think. So from my point of view, like the database connection itself, that may be a singleton object, and you mentioned the entity framework context. That would be a per request object, and then in my mind, any sort of service that uses entity framework would probably be a most likely. Be a transient object. Would you agree with that sort of breakdown?
Yes.
So he says, yeah, right here, but I kind of talk over him. So he repeats it later on. What is this here? Okay. So it's just me saying, okay, I can get rid of that. This all can go. That sort of breakdown?
Yes. Yeah.
Breakdown?
Yes. Yes. Although I must.
Here's if I can get rid of that. I want to zoom in a little bit.
Yes. Yes. Although I must say that I actually prefer.
So he goes into a little bit of a tangent here about, not a tangent, but breakdown.
Yes. Yes.
Something that
although I must say that
is
I
not necessarily
prefer
something that needs to be in the
nowadays
episode.
to keep lifetime management completely.
So this
out
might
of
be a
the
part I
picture.
edit out if I need more time.
But this is actually a topic. But this is actually a topic that I discussed with Mark, and we decided not to put in the book.
Right, it's not even
But
in
I
the book.
like
So it's just an idea he's been developing. I don't think there's even a blog post for it.
Object graphs, so all the classes in my system to have a singleton lifestyle. But this.
He wants to be all singletons, basically.
Singleton lifestyle. But this has certain consequences and constraints. And for instance, one of the constraints is that objects such as DB context can't be injected any longer in a constructor. But in fact, anything that has
Get rid of all that part there.
in a constructor, anything that has runtime data should be a little bit modeled differently. But and this can be
This.
and this can be hard to imagine.
4 viewers still hanging in there. You guys are real gluttons for punishment.
Hard to
About halfway down
imagine
here.
at first. But what I realized down the line is that there's a whole set of
It's just about midnight my time, but I need to get this finished tonight.
A set of problems with DI and DI containers that are all related to lifetime management. And if you skip that,
Clicking noise sometimes.
management, and if you skip
You
that,
make when your mouth gets a
and
little dry.
put some extra
Some people are worse than others with that.
and if you skip that, put some extra constraints on your code and on your design, you can remove this complete set of issues.
It's an interesting kind of theory he's putting forth here.
And that actually makes developing much easier.
But I just don't know if it's generally applicable.
Developing much easier. I
Well,
hope that makes sense.
That's not in the book. Yes. So I kind of try to steer him away from that going forward. I don't want him to really expand on that idea because we only have a limited amount of time in the podcast. Well, so Calvin says, seeing you go through this is awesome. Really helps me see changes I can make when I'm editing. So, Calvin, just if you want to do the editing type of thing that I'm doing here, when you're doing a little bit by bit, just be warned, it's going to eat a lot of time. And Coder Phoenix says, to be totally fair, you're currently serving as background on my TV while I fart around online in bed. Okay, fair enough. Well, so
Much easier.
Well, so that's not in the book.
Much easier.
That's not in the book. Interesting, so I'd like to learn more about that in depth, I think. Do you have a blog post about that maybe we could link to at some point?
No, not.
Yeah, so I'm asking him straight out. Where can we direct listeners want to learn more about that? Link to at some point?
No, not yet.
Okay.
For the last 4 or 5 years.
So there, I'm kind of like snorting. Like he wants to talk about this idea that could probably be like a 3 or 4 hour podcast of its own. Calvin says, that's what I'm already doing, though, without locking, etc. Oh, my God, Calvin. Oh, my God. Without sync locking, you're doing this type of editing. You are a crazy person. I don't know how you did it. They sound really good, I got to say. You did a great job. But you're probably putting in way more work than you need to. Point?
No, not yet. For the last...
This is also kind of loud here. You can tell he gets kind of excited about this part.
No, not yet. For the last 4 or 5 years.
A long F.
Last 4 or 5 years, I think 4 years. I 4 or 5 years. I think 4 years. I want to write.
So this sort of mumbly part here, we can remove that.
5 years. Want to write a blog post about that. I still do. And I, at one moment...
2-3 hours per episode so far. Well, that's pretty good, actually. Considering the length of our episodes are longer than a normal Cross-Cutting Concerns episode. 4 hours when you tried Audition. I've never used Audition. So, I don't know, it might be a superior tool. I know Audacity can be kind of obtuse sometimes. You know, you go up to Effect here. There's this massive drop-down list. And you have all these icons up here. You're not really sure what they mean. If you need them as often as they really... Do they really need to be up here on this toolbar? You know, probably half these icons I don't even use. Stuff like that. And then you got this drop-down here. And so, you know, it's like a free open source tool. So that's kind of the trade-off you get there. It's like a GIMP versus Photoshop situation.
I still do. At one moment I will, but it's still not there.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm kind of signaling to him that let's move on from that. But that does seem like a very interesting topic to blog about. It's not really something I've ever heard before.
Up there.
So like I skimmed your book a little bit. Manning was nice.
Up there.
I skimmed your book a little bit. Manning was nice enough to send me a free copy to review. So thank you, Manning. There is a... Okay, he's saying awesome to that. Doesn't really add anything, so we'll remove that. I skimmed your book a little bit. Manning was nice enough to send me a free copy to review. That's true. They did send me a free copy. To review. So thank you, Manning. There's a section in chapter... Not really a sponsor of this episode, but they hooked me up with Steven to do the interview and sent me a copy of the book to review. And, you know, I'm a Manning author myself, so it's kind of a professional courtesy. Manning. There's a section in chapter... There's a section in chapter 4 that I found interesting, and I just, like I said, I scanned this briefly, but it's about method injection. And this is something... method injection, yes. And this is something, you know, usually when we talk about dependency... And this is something, yeah, that's really useful. You know, usually when we talk about dependency injection, we think of constructor injection, or if you're an old-timer like us, maybe even property injection. But I don't see too much about... An old timer like us. Injection. I don't see too much about method injection. With referring to myself as an old timer. Injection. With the exception of maybe the .NET Core. The .NET Core startup, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. So could you maybe briefly explain, if it's possible, what method injection is and why would I use it and any sort of gotchas around it? Good old method injection. Okay, blank this part out here. This is really loud. Around it? Oh.
Excuse me.
A sneeze or a cough or something. That's going. Around it?
Excuse me. Let me do a sip here. Well, in the in the book we describe the
around it.
In the book we describe the 3 basic injection patterns, which are, as you already call them, constructor injection, property injection, and method injection. And constructor injection.
That part right there. How does this transparent thing look, Calvin? Is that super distracting? It doesn't look great from what I can tell, but it does give a little more real estate to the actual Audacity and stuff.
Constructor injection and property injection are patterns that you apply inside your application's entry point. So for instance, if you're using a DI container, the container can inject those dependencies for you when it creates the object graph. So it can inject it into the constructor or optionally in a property. Method.
Not distracting per se, but wonky. Yeah.
Method injection, however, works.
I wonder if there's a way to adjust it. I might have to just spring for the green screen or something.
However, works the other way around. So you would use method injection typically when you have to supply a dependency to an object that is not created by your DI container. Say
Cutter Phoenix, it jitters a bit from time to time, but it's not too bad. Much better than taking up a whole window. Yeah, I guess it's better than nothing.
Say, for instance, you're practicing domain-driven design with DDD.
Okay, so DDD is something I need to link to, and I think I put a note about that right here. The old blue book. Quick distraction by Twitter. People still bringing in the chair recommendations. I guess I should post that I bought a chair and stop recommending chairs. DDD book. It's, yeah, this one here. Domain-driven design, tackling complexity. I usually link to Amazon for these. I don't use any affiliate links or anything. It's just, Amazon. When possible. Maybe I should put in affiliate links. What's going on here, website? Load it on up. Anyway, that's the URL, so I'll paste it there. The old DDD book.
Your entities will have domain logic in them. And this logic.
A little bit of the I didn't get.
Have domain logic in them, and this logic often needs to make use of dependencies. Your entities, however, are still data-centric objects, so they're blocks of runtime data, and they are therefore not constructed by your DI container, and they shouldn't be. So they are rather constructed by your ORM tool or inside a data access layer, perhaps. But this means that constructor injection is not possible and property injection rather impractical. So still you wish to supply dependencies to the entity, and method injection is a solution here. So with method injection you provide, for instance, an entity's domain method with a set of dependencies that that specific method requires. So you supply the values that method needs, some runtime data plus the dependencies, and you can pass them in manually, which means so we don't use a DI container at all to supply those dependencies to that method, and that method and that method internally doesn't store that those dependencies either. It just uses them. That's I think the main uses them. That's I think the main use case for using method injection.
Okay. And so when I think method, smooth, real smooth. Master of segues.
Method injection.
When I think method injection, I think of the .NET startup methods. .NET startup methods where you can just sort of add additional parameters to. It's literally the only example I could think of on the fly is the add additional parameters to it and just start using them, and the framework. Probably much better examples, but I also want to transition into something else and just start using them. The framework handles that for you, and so I want to sort of segue into one of the biggest changes in D. The best thing you can do with segue is say, hey, this is a segue. Sort of segue into one of the biggest changes in DI in .NET recently. Is that .NET Core ships with a built-in IOC container, and now you said you created and you're the main contributor to Simple Injector, and now you said you created and you're the main contributor to Simple Injector. So another thing I want to do while I'm going through this episode is get like a 10 to 15 second clip that I can use as like a little promo clip on Twitter and stuff. Haven't really heard the killer soundbite yet, so sure. So again, I asked this about Jeremy Miller and Lamar. So many Lamar, do I still need to use Simple Injector? Can I use them together? What was this? Yeah. Injector. Can I use them together? Do I have to pick one or the other? What are the trade-offs involved there? Love those clips. BTW, very cool, says Calvin. Yeah, the little headliner clips. Something I started doing recently. I don't know if it helps improve listenership or not, but I don't know. I think I like them. I'll probably make one tonight. Just make sure I have everything done, so I don't have to think about this over the weekend at all. I got a busy weekend ahead. Involved there. I think this is me laughing. I recognize my own waveform of my own laugh at this point. There.
Yeah. The short answer.
Involved there.
The short answer is it depends.
Yep. Always love it depends. So I'll edit out his here, because you got to hear my laughter.
Depends. And I think it all. I think it also depends on...
Actually, that might be the clip right there. The it depends. Can I use them together? Do I have to pick one or the other? Do I still need to use simple injector? Can I use them together? Do I have to pick one or the other? What are the trade-offs involved there?
The short answer is it depends.
Yep, I think that's good. Go with that. I'll edit that out a little bit too. So what I do with these, I'll just copy it. I'll start a new Audacity window. Paste it in here. Do I still need to use simple injector? Can I use them together? Do I have to pick one or the other? What are the trade-offs involved there? So edit out this part here. Whoops. See, I hit Control S. Do I still need to use simple injector? What are the trade-offs involved there?
The short answer is it depends.
Yep, okay, that's a pretty good clip. That's about 8 seconds, a little short. So let me just save that, and I'll save that in my podcast folder. Hey, there you are. Episode 9, right there. Coral Roush and Erlang. Just happened to see that. But this will be my headliner clip. I'm going to try, while I got this short little clip here, I'm going to try that low pass filter. See what I can do here. I think maybe I want to do, no, bass and treble.
The short answer is it depends.
Oh, that seems to help.
The short answer is it depends.
Kinda.
The short answer is...
Yeah, I can definitely hear it there.
The short answer is it depends.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's the best way to do it or not. What else we got? Leveler, invert, equalization. So, what kind of curves we got here? Base cut, maybe? Let's try that. Involved there.
The short answer is it depends.
Okay. Now it sounds like he's in a, I don't know, like he's in an old-time radio show. Do I still need to use simple injector? What are the trade-offs involved there?
The short answer is it depends.
Yeah, that's no good. But let's go back to equalization. So maybe not base cut. But maybe, I don't know, some of these frequencies can stay there.
The short answer is it depends.
A little better there.
The short answer is it depends.
It's a little crackly noise though.
The short answer is it depends.
I think that crackly noise may just be involved there.
The short answer is it depends.
Just might have to deal with that. All right, I think that's pretty good. One other trick, by the way, if you're using equalization, Calvin, which you can also use to filter out plosives, which is what I usually use it for. But once you apply equalization filter, you can reapply it with Control R. So especially helpful for plosives. You just highlight it, equalize it, and then Control R when you do that going forward. So I'll normalize my track as well. Okay, I think I normalized his. Did I want to normalize his? Doesn't look like it. Do I still need to use simple injector? What are the trade-offs involved there?
The short answer is it depends.
Yep, that's pretty good. Okay, so we'll come back to that.
The short answer is it depends.
But while I'm at it, why don't I go ahead and apply that equalizer with Control R. Oh, amplify. Nope. So Control R just does the last operation. So equalization, I need to use base cut on that. see if that sounds better.
They're not thread safe, so you don't want to reuse them.
Oh, that sounds so much better. It still sounds a little bit like oldie time radio, but it's better than the thum I was hearing the whole time. Okay, where was I? So as you can see, we started at 20 minutes, and now we're down to 17 minutes, 45 seconds ish. It's going pretty well. Why would I use it, and any sort of gotchas around it? That's the method injection. Jeremy Miller and Lamar. Do I still need to use simple injector? Can I use them together? Do I have to pick one or the other? What are the trade-offs involved there?
The short answer is it depends. I think it also depends on your point of view. From a technical perspective, simple injector is.
So there's an and there's a little tongue click. Get rid of that.
Simple injector is one of the few containers that actually. No, let us cut this out and let me retry.
Okay.
That's the advantage of pre-recording, isn't it?
Exactly.
Whether the building container is.
Okay, so we'll cut this part right here, and then I can flatten this one.
Whether the building container is good enough completely depends on your needs. In the book, Mark and I compare 3 container libraries to all the patterns and practices that laid forth in the book. And in the book we describe AutoFac, Simple Injector, and the new Microsoft DI container. And each container.
So he mentioned Simple Injector, AutoFac. So I probably should link to Simple Injector. Simple Injector and AutoFac is the other one he mentioned. So I'll put links to those. Get those later.
Container. Each container got its own chapter. From perspective of these patterns and practices, however, we concluded that the Microsoft DI container.
This is the really controversial part of this episode. I don't know if listeners are really going to appreciate what he's about to say, but it's pretty controversial.
The Microsoft DI container is unsuited. And it's...
Unsuited, it says.
Suited. And it's unsuited to build complex line of business applications. Because it...
Yep, he went there.
Because it lacks all kinds of features that allow your application and its entry point to stay maintainable and you as a developer productive. So, productive. So, but if you're building a really small application of when you're creating a library reusable library for ASP.NET, using that container is probably fine. Although, if you are creating a really small application, I would even suggest not using a DI container at all, because.
So he's basically saying it's not useful for complex line of business applications. It's okay for small applications, but you might not even need it there at all. So he's basically saying it's not really useful. Period. He's kind of boxed it into a corner there.
At all, because because the Microsoft DI container brings so little, has so little benefits that
He's saying it, not me.
that I would prefer using no container at all. And that doesn't mean that you don't use dependency injection. You should absolutely use dependency injection, but it simply means that in your applications entry point, you compose the object graph.
Whoops, there we go.
Compose the object graphs of your application by hand, just using plain old C#, because that is an option that we typically forget and develop.
You've heard that the built-in DI container is not really useful for anything complex. So we discussed this a little bit off the air, but my point of view is that it's probably good enough for most things. And there are a few pieces of functionality that are missing. It's kind of a lowest common denominator DI container, or IOC container, I guess. So that if you need those situations, that's when you'd bring in like Lamar or Simple Injector and stuff like that. But I think to start with the assumption that it's not good enough, I'd wait until run into a situation where that was in fact the case.
Typically forget developers.
But keep in mind, this guy wrote a book on dependency injection and has created and maintained a very popular DI container for a long time. So, you know, if anyone knows better, then it's probably him.
Typically forget developers don't think about, and if you say dependency injection, they think, oh, I need to use a library. But that's not always the case.
That is also a good point. You don't necessarily need to use a DI library to achieve dependency injection. But again, that's a little bit of an academic point. Like, it almost, you know, I don't really want to go through the trouble of not using a container that is using a library. I'd want to use something. Even for a simple demo app, I use DI.
Always the case.
Yeah. So definitely some good trade-offs to think about there. It's always about trade-offs in technology, right?
Always the case.
So definitely some good trade-offs to think about there. There's no silver bullet. There's no best practice. I think, as Jim Holmes would say, the best practice is use your brain. Good trade-offs to think about there. I think we could talk about this. Yeah, and I almost go down the rabbit hole there, but I catch myself because we're running short on time out there. Yeah, I think we could talk about this for a long time, but we don't have a long. His little chuckles are good to keep in. I'll keep those in. Time, but we don't have a long. A long show to discuss this. So, we really don't. That's what it comes down to. I have a 15-minute show, and again, this topic alone could probably be a whole book, a course, several hour discussion. Your book, which again is dependency injection. Whoops. And for listeners who want to learn more about simple to discuss this. So what I would recommend now is there anything you'd recommend for listeners who want to learn more about? Okay, this is first of my 2 general purpose wrap-up questions. So almost done. Recommend for listeners who want to learn more about Simple Injector, DI. Of course, they should purchase your book, which again, shameless plug. Purchase your book, which again is dependency injection principles principles, practices, and patterns. So that's definitely a good place. Patterns. So that's definitely a good place to start. Any other, get rid of that. Of course, it's a good place to start. Practices and patterns. Any other resources? Any other resources? Other resources you'd recommend for listeners who want to learn more?
Um,
So that is very clear. That can go. Get rid of that. Now I think he says something else that I think would probably upset Manning, so I'm probably going to edit that portion out. But you, loyal Twitch stream viewer / YouTube viewer, you get to hear this behind the scenes clip. Who want to learn more?
yeah, if you want to learn more about why the Microsoft DI container is not suited for building complex line of is not.
He's doing this again with the Microsoft DI container.
Container is not suited for building complex line of business applications. Yeah, the book is certainly the best place to start, and that's chapter 15.
Chapter 15, so they talk about that. So it's worth reading that chapter to see the reasoning for that. And you know, of course, you can come to your own conclusions, but he lays it out in a chapter. Why you might want to avoid that container.
It's chapter 15. But if you're not that much of a reader, Manning published some.
If you're not that much of a reader, this whole episode is about books.
Much of a reader, Manning published some excerpts from the book.
They did, in fact, publish excerpts.
Some excerpts from the book, and I can put them in the show notes.
Which he did graciously send me those links right down here. These excerpts from Manning.
There's also what Manning calls a live book, so you can read the book online. And of course, if you want to read the whole book, you have to pay. But if you go direct.
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to edit out. And actually, this live book thing was just sort of spinning up as I was finishing my first book, so I never got any of the live book stuff myself.
And of course, if you want to read the whole book, you have to pay. But if you go directly to a chapter, I think Manning will, by default, open up half a chapter of you. So you can actually read quite some things. And you, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that, but I think if you use private browsing and a VPN proxy, you might be able to read another chapter as well. Not sure about that, but it doesn't hurt to try. There's a chapter on simple injector.
Okay, so if you didn't catch that, he basically is telling listeners that they should try to work around some of the limitations that Manning's put in place for you to try to get you to purchase the whole book. And we're talking like a $40, $50 book here, so, and Manning has deals all the time, so I'm editing that out just for Manning's sake. I don't want to encourage people to, to try to use in private browsing and VPN to try to get around those limitations. So I'm editing that out.
The book online. There's a chapter on simple injector in the book as well, of course. And one thing I am very wary about is, and
you kind of hems and haws here a little bit.
Course, one thing I am very wary.
So I'm going to edit this out here. Calvin says they run crazy deals all the time. They do run crazy deals. And in fact, when I published my book, they gave me a 40% off coupon that I could basically give out to anyone I wanted to. And so I'd put that in my slides when I was presenting at conferences. I'd say, hey, go buy this book, get 40% off. And, Manning prices are already very reasonable. And if you buy the paper copy, they even come with a code to get the ebook copy. So, I mean, it's a really good deal. It's a pretty good tech publishing company, I'd say. pretty friendly to tech people, not trying to lock everything down with DRM and charge you different prices for the ebook and the print book and stuff like that. They're not trying to play those kinds of games. So I like that about Manning.
Of course, one thing I very wary about.
One thing he's very wary about.
Wary about is how Microsoft defined an abstraction. So Microsoft allows other DI containers to run by the use of
This is where he talks about the lowest common denominator situation.
an adapter, but that didn't really work out that well. So if you want to
I don't think it did work out that well. I don't really see much of that.
So if you want to learn more about what the fuss is about with that DI abstraction and why actually none of the major DI containers have a 100% compatible adapter, and why this is actually a major problem, there's a blog post on the Simple Injector blog that has a detailed information about this, and I can put that in the show notes as well.
He did. Great. I will add those at crosscuttingconcerns.com. Also like to plug the site. I do this because you never know when you put an episode out there if someone's going to like hijack it and serve it up as their own content. So I like to put plugs to my own site in the podcast itself, just in case that sort of thing happens.
As well.
Great. I will add those at crosscuttingconcerns.com. Is there anything else you'd like to promote as we wrap up the show? Now, this is a part of the show where I basically give the guest carte blanche to promote literally anything they want to. Most of the time, they just promote their Twitter or blog or something. Sometimes people promote some really out there stuff. Like one guy, we spent the whole time talking about Realm, and then he plugged his improv group, which I thought was just terrific. This is exactly why I give guests a chance to plug stuff. So they can plug all kinds of crazy things. Sometimes people take this opportunity to just plug like, hey, go spend some time with your family. Don't stay up past midnight editing podcasts all the time. Go get away from your computer. So I like that kind of stuff. The show.
Well, if you are interested.
Oh.
If you are interested, you can follow me on Twitter. But do note that besides my interest in software development, I'm very interested in geopolitics.
I like this disclaimer too. It's fun.
In geopolitics and privacy nowadays. So you'll find that part of my mainly retweets are related to these topics as well. So I can put the link to
Calvin says, don't stay up past midnight watching somebody else edit a podcast. LOL. Yeah, exactly. It's a good plug, Calvin.
Put the link to the Twitter account, the Twitter handle in the show notes.
Yep. Yeah, and I always link to my guests on Twitter. They're almost always find them via Twitter, so they almost always have a Twitter account. So maybe one or two exceptions. I always put Twitter at the end of the show notes. Yep. Okay, so if you follow him, you've been warned, people. My guest... Okay, just one little joke there. Yeah, you have been warned. Right? He's saying, basically, I blog tech, but I also blog politics stuff. So, just fair warning. Don't follow him and then get upset when he tweets something about politics.
In the show notes.
Okay, so if you follow him, you've been warned, people. Give him a little chance to laugh there. And then, that's it. We're at the end. My guest today has been Steven Van Dorsen. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Get this out. And that is it. Done. Look at that. Almost 16 minutes on the dot. It's about a minute over my target. That is completely acceptable. Okay, so let's go ahead and normalize my audio. my track. Still a few more steps here until I'm done for the day. And normalize his. Okay, just make sure it sounds okay. From Manning?
Yes, it is. The book Dependency Injection in .NET was published, I think, 7.
It's a little quiet. What if I can just maybe amplify it a little bit more? There's a couple parts here that are kind of pegging it. What is this?
We're actually on the topic.
Right.
But yeah, in the end, it's just.
Yeah, maybe I can just reduce these a little bit. Give myself some more room to work.
The topic.
Right.
But yeah, in the end.
Anything else pegged here? Doesn't look like it, so let's try and amplify again. A little bit more.
Of that book. In the process, however, our publisher decided to change the title of the second edition.
I think it'll be fine. I've had worse quality episodes. I think that turned out pretty well considering the source. Okay, the source audio. The next thing I do is over here I have a template folder where I keep all the mess that makes up the extra stuff that goes around the episode. So I've got my template for 2019. Open that up. This should be just a relatively empty Audacity template here. I'll save a copy of this in here. So I call this one podcast produced. And this one, I should have saved it, so I made a mistake here. I edited over my own audio, but that's fine. I usually call this one podcast. So I have podcast and I have podcast produced. So I'm about an hour and a half in this episode. And you know, I've been distracted by Twitter and by Twitch a little bit, so that's actually making pretty good time. Okay, bring up this template. So here is like the theme music and intro audio. This is like a little ad copy I have in the middle, and this is the end music and end credits. So I will squish those a little bit. And then over here in the podcast, what I normally do is I will mix and render to new track. So I'll combine them into one single track at this point. And it's a stereo track. And I also go ahead and turn off sync lock and cut, paste this over here. And then I'll line this up. And just to get an idea that sounds okay, you kind of hear the episode. This is my intro music. It's my sweet little daughter playing on the piano, recorded at home. And here's me blabbing.
You're listening to the Cross-Cutting Concerns
Skip
pod.
that. I'm recording this podcast on
Okay,
April
sounds good.
3rd. And then I've got to cut a section in the middle to do my little call to action. So where would be a good place to cut? Probably right around here somewhere.
To be injected any longer in the constructor. Anything that has runtime data should be a little bit
So maybe like right here when I start blabbing.
much easier.
That's not in the book, so I'd like to learn more about that in depth, I think. Do you have a blog post about that maybe we could link to at some point?
No, not yet. For the last 4 or 5 years, want to write a blog post about that. I still do. At one moment I will, but it's still not there.
I skimmed your book. Okay, that's a great place for a break right there. So I'm just going to zoom in here. That was a pretty cool change with the intro. Yeah, you know, last year's season music was cool. It was a chance for me to work with Joe Ferg, you know, who I used to work with at Ohio State University. But my daughter's getting pretty good at the piano, so I thought I would try to incorporate her into it as well. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to actually take this track, I'm going to split it, into two pieces. So I can, let me zoom in here, it just kind of splits it into three pieces really. So I will, what are we talking here? Rejoin them. So now I've got this break in the middle, kind of like a commercial break. And this is my commercial break music. And that's how that will work. So it'll go like this.
There.
And then it quiets down. So this is the point where I've got to actually drop in a call to action. And the call to actions, I try to have my guests record them this season. Last couple of guests didn't really want to do that. So what I did last episode was I recorded my own call to action. I think it was in here. Yeah, Matt call to action. Here it is. So it's just a clip of me talking. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Are you a regular? So I'm going to copy that. And paste it somewhere around here. Yeah, that'll be good. Squeeze that over here and squeeze this one over here. Let's see how that sounds.
I will, but it's still not there.
Hey, you. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Are you a regular listener to Cross-Cutting Concerns? I really need your help. Would you please do at least one of these three things? 1. Leave a review on iTunes. 2. Tell people about the podcast on social media. 3. Go to crosscuttingconcerns.com/podcast and leave me some feedback. Also, I'm thinking about doing an episode this season where I just answer listener questions for a whole episode. So send me your question, I'll read it, and I'll answer it. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to Jamie. So one of the things I love about our .NET Bytes podcast, Calvin, is we're getting a lot of interaction, a lot of questions. And I really like answering those questions on the episodes. That's why I love all the Reddit comments we've gotten and the iTunes reviews and tweets and things. So it's one thing I'm trying to get more of in my own podcast. It may just be that interview-style show is not going to get that kind of interaction. But I'm kind of holding out that will happen. So, all right, I gotta move this end credit stuff to the end here. Make sure that sounds okay. Van Dorsen, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, let's get back to Jamie. Oh, yikes, it does say that, doesn't it? Van Dorsen, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Good catch, Calvin. Jeez, I would have completely just shipped it. Okay. Question, I'll read it and I'll answer it. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to Jamie. So I'm just going to mute that because I'm super lazy. And I'll answer it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. It's fine. People fast forward it anyway, I'm sure. My guest today has been Steven Van Dorsen. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I love this song. This has been the Cross-Cutting Concerns podcast. Produced and recorded by Matt Grove. Is by Emma Groves. My pride and joy. I just love that. Okay, so we've got a total now of 18 minutes, 15 seconds. That's probably fine. But there we go, complete episode. We're still not done. So D, podcast, Steven Van Dorsen. I'll call this one podcast produced. MP3. And I got to put in some tag information here, so I usually just say Cross-Cutting Concerns podcast, and then never get the spelling right. Steven Van Dorsen on, I hope it's a lowercase v, dependency injection. Okay, so that's going to export the MP3 file, and that's what I'm going to upload into MP3. Coder Phoenix, I never fast forward. I need every second and every awkward cut for my commute. Still commuting, huh? Commuting is old and busted, Phoenix. Working at home is the new hotness. I'll listen to podcasts now when I'm like working in my yard on the lawnmower or like when I'm in the shower. That's only time I have for podcasts anymore. Or sometimes when I'm traveling, I listen to podcasts too. So I mainly stick to like comedy podcasts. Which, by the way, Hello from the Magic Tavern, you introduced me to. I still listen to it. I listen to every episode. I'm a loyal listener to Hello from the Magic Tavern to this day. Quick Twitter distraction. Okay. All right. So the way I name my episodes is name the files like this. He also sent me a headshot. So here he is. Here's Steven. It's square, so that's good, but it's kind of small. I'm going to resize it 3000 by 3000. That's what Apple recommends. I don't know if it really makes a difference or not, but I'm just going to do that. And man, why does my directory keep resetting here? Okay, and I'll just call it the same name, the same file name, but just .jpg. Magic Tavern is still a part of it. Yeah, it is. It is one of the few things to look forward to on Monday morning, right? So another work week, but at least there's a Magic Tavern episode. Okay, now I host my podcast on Azure, so I've got this little utility here called Azure Explorer that allows me to connect to what do you call it? File storage on Azure. So you can see here's all the episodes right here from episode 1 up to 115. And now 116 will be joining them. Do a quick copy and paste. Okay. So I'll do the headliner stuff later, but right now the other thing I need to work on is the actual blog post. So I will go to my blog here and just doing the copy and paste inheritance situation here. So I'll copy the last episode folder. So my blog is completely custom. It's not like it's a statically generated content. I'll call this Steven DI. But I still write them locally with with Visual Studio Code. So it'll be in 054. I write them in ASCII doc. So this is 116, right? And again, more copy and paste. Just to make sure I get the spelling right. Steven Van Dorsen on dependency injection. And we'll just copy and paste to make a nice slug for that. Dependency injection. So Steven Van Dorsen is building Calvin. I wrote a rake task for mine that stubs out a new folder, file, etc. That's probably a good idea. I could do something like that, create a batch file or something. I created a program you might see in a second here to help me get this ready to post to my blog, but don't have something to create this file yet. Steven Van Dorsen is building maintainable software with dependency injection. That'll be my meta description, and it'll also be the first line of the post. Okay, so this is the old path, the old stuff, so I'll get rid of that. The old tags, so we'll make this dependency injection, IOC, simple injector. That's probably good enough for tags. Okay, so I'll go over to Azure Explorer here, and I can right click on this and copy path, and that'll give me the image path, so it's currently live right now, basically. So you seeing this episode now can get the episode early if you want to. Another Twitter distraction. Still more chair talk. Geez, I tell you what, developers are passionate about their chairs. Where was I? Oh, yes. The file size. So the iTunes RSS feed needs the file size and also the length. So that's the file size. And the length. This is stuff that probably... what do you use for your podcast hosting, Calvin? Like Fireside or something like that? It probably does this automatically. And it is 18 minutes, 18 seconds long. 18 minutes, 18 seconds long. I have no sponsor, so just a shameless plug to sign up for my Fiverr or something. Show notes go there. I'll start by copying and pasting all this stuff. And I will say Stephen Fireside.fm. Yeah, that's what you use. So I did it the hard way. Everything on my feed, my blog, is all custom. ASP.NET 4.5 probably at this point. And you'll see it here in a second. Another call to action to be a guest on the show. All right, so just visit these links to make sure they all work. This is Steven's blog. .NET Junkie, weblog of a workaholic. Okay. So I'll just sort of show you here. Markdown, or ASCII doc's a little different than Markdown. So you say link, colon, and then square bracket. And you say, I'll just say .NET Junkie, Steven's blog. Okay, this is the actual book, so I usually like to put the book like this, link, and then dependency injection. Principles, practices, and patterns. Okay. Do a link to check out episode 94 with Jeremy Miller on Lamar. Another book plug. Domain-driven design book. That's probably good enough. Okay, I want to link to Simple Injector. What's the best link for that, do you think? Is there a Simple Injector website? No, AutoFag website too. This is the two you mentioned. simpleinjector.org, that'd be good. It's 2 words. Simple Injector. Okay, and then AutoFac is the other one. AutoFac.org. don't think I've ever used AutoFact before. And some free excerpts from the book. And we'll see what these actually are. This is, I'm guessing, a chapter or part of a chapter. What's with the internet right now? Maybe my streaming is taking all the bandwidth. I don't know. Writing maintainable, loosely coupled code. We'll just call it that. That makes sense. This one is understanding the composition root. That kind of relates to the DDD book. Man, what is with it? It's just chugging. I bet Allie's streaming some video or something too. It's just really taxing the internet right now. So I'll just go ahead and, while I'm waiting for that, put a little ASCII doc here. Understanding the composition roots. That's good. Abuse of abstract factories. Okay, this is a blog post from 2016. But he definitely referenced it a couple times in the episode. What's wrong with the ASP.NET Core DI abstraction? Oh, it's got one of these smart quotes in it. I hate those things. Let me just browse this briefly. Yeah, this is kind of what I've heard, and it kind of makes sense. That you know, if you want to build dependency injection into your framework, I mean, I guess there might be other approaches, but you kind of have to make it lowest common denominator. So that was innovation. I'm not sure about that. Makes it more difficult to avoid using DI container. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. Versioning hell. I have to read more about that. I'm not sure what this point is about either. So, I don't know, interesting stuff in here. That is a lot to read. There's a big wall of text. That's practically a research paper right there. But anyway, that's definitely relevant, so I'm putting it in there. Okay, and let's just get a quick preview of this, make sure it looks okay. Looks good. Okay. All right, so what I'll do now is I've written a little script I call AD clean, which I use for logging in all kinds of different places. But this turns ASCII doc into HTML, not just HTML because that's easy enough to do from command line, but HTML that's ready for me to copy and paste into my own blog engine. So I will go to my own blog engine now. Again, a little bit of a look behind the scenes at my amazing homegrown blog content management system. Sure is taking a long time. Let me close Azure Explorer. Close out of this too, don't need that. We're almost at the 2-hour mark here. Probably finish up. Well, I still have to do the headliner clip. That'll take probably 10 minutes to do. So we're winding down. If my site's ever going to load, come on. Okay, yep, my super secret login. Already filled in for me with LastPass. Don't look. Don't look. Nothing to see here. Not entirely dissimilar to the Frankensteining I do between org mode and Jekyll, says Coder Phoenix. Yeah, I know this is kind of junky. This is the mechanics car type situation here, and you can see how old this is. This is like the default template from like ASP.NET MVC 3, I think. So that's where I'm at with this right now. But it works. It's fine. Okay, add a new post. Here's my title right here. Again, if the page ever loads. Okay, the title, it generates a slug for me, but it's not a great slug. I have to generate that manually, so I'll put that in there. Now I can actually, this is just tiny MCE, so I'll just paste my code in here. Like so. Bada bing. My tags are, can't really paste those, but podcast. Well, can I do this? Let's do this. Podcast, dependency, injection, IOC, and simple injector. Those are all good. Okay. The hero image, which I call episode artwork, and the podcast path, and the podcast size, and podcast length. And my little SEO meta description will just be this part right here. Not ideal, but it's fine. Okay, and a quick save. Calvin says, I heart Jekyll. Yeah, I know. Calvin, you are absolutely in love with the static site content generator deals. I've never really gotten into them. There's nothing wrong with them at all, but I've just never really gotten into them. My first real programming job was building CMS systems on top of a database. That's just kind of my go-to. So it's saved into my database here, and let's just go and double check it, get it ready for publishing. So I'm going to set it to be public. I'm going to set to publish on April 8 at 0 hours. Okay. Coder Phoenix, I like it. I have org generates HTML and front matter, and Jekyll handles the publishing organization. Yeah, so Calvin and I both help run a .NET user group here in Columbus, and it runs on, I think it runs on Jekyll, if I'm not mistaken, Calvin. And it's great. Yeah, you just write files, push them to GitHub, and away we go. So yeah, I have nothing against them. It's just this is so old. This was kind of, I don't know. I wasn't really into any of that stuff back then. I just haven't got around to changing it. At one point, I tried to convert this over to use Couchbase. I think I could do some really cool stuff with Couchbase as a backend for my own personal blog, but it's just, I don't know. Mechanics car. So here's what the post is going to look like when it's published on Monday morning. Looks good to me. Okay. One last thing, and that is, well, I'm going to commit this first. Don't need to commit the HTML files. So 5.4, this is the podcast episode 115 with Stephen on DI. Commit. And here's a little secret, by the way. I always push this out to GitHub. It's a public repo. So it's not just you on Twitch who can get an early download of the episode. It's anyone who follows that repo can go there and look at those ASCII files and get access to that link. But, whatever. Who really cares? Okay, the last thing I want to do is my call to action clip. Or no, not call to action. My my little headliner clip. Where is that? Here we go. So it's this guy right here. Do I still need to use Simple Injector? What are the trade-offs involved there?
The short answer is it depends.
Okay, so I'll just export this as MP3. Headline clip. And headliner.app is the website that I use. I don't remember how I found out about this or how they approached me or whatever, but it's totally free, and it's kind of nifty how it works. So you get to see this real quick here. At the end, I'll just end up with like an MP4 file that I can share on. I usually share on Twitter. So as far as the publishing the episode is concerned, we're all done there. That's all ready to go. So the rest, everything is, at this point, it's now just promotion. Whew, the internet is really just chugging along. It's got to be this Twitch stream plus whatever Ali's doing with the Roku upstairs. That's got to be it. Oh, goodness. Okay. Audiogram wizards. These are called audiograms, I guess. Close up Visual Studio Code. Okay, so we drop that audio file in there, like so. I'm going to turn on transcription, although generally speaking, I mostly kind of ignore the transcription. But what it does, it takes the text MP3 file and tries to turn it into subtitles. And I always go square, and I like pixelated, and I'll use his headshot as a background image for it. Stephen Van Dorsen, right here. That'll work. Great project. Is she not using the Roku to watch your stream? That's what I'm doing. So, hey, that's interesting. Are you using there's like an unofficial Twitch app on Roku, or are you using something else? Because I've tried this before, and the Roku app that I found left something to be desired. She's definitely not watching me on Roku. If anything, she's watching one of those terrible NBC dramas or CBS dramas on Hulu or something. But yeah, I'm kind of curious what you're using on Roku to watch Twitch, because I had a rough experience with it. Your browser is too small to use Headliner. Please maximize your browser. Wow. Well, that's because I've got the resolution much lower on this monitor for streaming purposes. We'll see if it'll work anyway. Yeah, exactly. This Is Us. That's the one she watches. Oh my goodness, Calvin. Is that a show that you watch, or is that a similar situation where your wife watches it and and you can't stand it? This Is Us is one. There's like A Million Little Pieces is another one I think she watches. Yeah, I can't stand those shows. Yeah, Calvin says, "Lord, no." You know what I have been watching? Just came on recently. Is the new Twilight Zone series. It is really good. You know, Twilight Zone's been rebooted probably 3 or 4 times since the original, Rod Serling masterpiece. This one is really good. I think Jordan Peele is doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the show, and it is just, I mean, it is good. I highly recommend the new Twilight Zone episodes. There's only been 2 out so far. They've both been very, very good. Not as family friendly, I guess, if you want to call the original Twilight Zones family friendly. In terms of like cursing and some violence and things, but otherwise, like, just really good. Oh boy. Do I still need to use Simple Injector? What are the trade-offs involved there?
The short answer is it depends.
Yeah, so we got the transcript here is the problem. Let's move it over to my other screen. See if it's a resolution thing. Twitched. Yeah, that's the one I used. Twitched. Seems to lag a bit behind. Yes, exactly. It was lagging behind. So one thing I do when I'm like viewing on Twitch, I'm not streaming. I like to play Jackbox Party Pack. But with Twitched, it's so lagged that there's no way you can really play along. So it's probably fine for like consuming, like you're doing, just sort of sitting back and watching, but actually interacting with it within a brief time window, it's just not suited for that. I'm wondering if there's like a Plex plugin that might be better for Roku. We're definitely a Roku house. They're all over the place here. Okay, well, this headliner stuff is taking a long time to happen, so I may have to close up here a little early and get this done. Oh. Yeah, browser's too small. I know. Maybe it's working. I use the PC for anything I want to interact with. For watching stuff like this or tuning into friends' gaming streams, this is just fine. Yeah, that makes sense. Do I still need to use Simple Inject? Okay, I think we're in good shape here. Do I still need to use Simple Injector? What are the trade-offs involved there?
The short answer is it depends.
So the headliner doesn't do a perfect job at getting all the text, so I usually have to end up typing it myself. We're talking an 8-second clip. That's not a big deal. I want to break this up a little bit. Do I still need to use Simple Injector? So right there, I'm going to cut this part out and trim it. So this will just be 2 minutes, 31, or 2 seconds, 2.31 seconds. Do a plus. What are the trade-offs involved there? Oh, this is really chugging. Coder, the PS4 app is pretty good too. I haven't plugged anything into Plex yet. I don't even know if there's a Twitch plugin for Plex. And in fact, I think Plex kind of discontinued plugin support, or at least stopped supporting plugins. I think you can still use them. I don't have a PS4. I do have a Switch. I don't know if you can get Twitch on a Switch. A little Twitch switch. Yeah, it's getting late. Do I still need to use Simple Injector? What are the trade-offs involved there? Okay, so that's good. And I'll take this one at 393. Oh, 393. I'm just pulling the time code from here. And then I'll add another segment. And it's going to chug along some more. I think that's the answer. The short answer is It depends. Just your classic weasel answer from a software architect. Which is why I love it. Man, this is taking way longer than normal because of the connection here. It's got to be the streaming taking everything. My frame rate is, what's my frame rate here? OBS says I'm about 4 kilobytes a second. Jeez Louise. 4,000 kilobytes a second.
The short answer is it. The short answer is it depends.
Okay, so we add the 702. Okay, and then I'll finish it out with Matt laughs. Put this over here. And Stephen, whoops. That ought to do it. Go to Phoenix. No Twitch the Switch. Not yet anyway. Send me your friend code sometime. We can more actively not play games together that way. My Switch friend code? So, I don't think I even have any games on the Switch. I think it's all my kids. My son and daughter both play a lot of Fortnite. Also, my son plays a lot of RBI baseball. And I think my daughter plays Minecraft on it. I don't think I have any games of my own on the Switch. I did get the Katamari reroll. I did get that. I love Katamari. It just makes sense on the Switch, so I got that for myself. I used to, when I was doing some Twitch streaming last year, I was doing it with my brother, and we would try to play adventure games, like co-op adventure games, basically. But we had so many technical problems with streaming. But there's some OBS stuff that has been released since then that we might try that again. Okay. Here we go. Simple Injector. What are the trade-offs? Do I still need to use Simple Injector? What are the trade-offs involved there?
The short answer is it depends.
Okay, we'll export that. Add a little headliner watermark and export. Okay. So that's going to generate an MP4 file for me. It's going to do it in the background. So it'll email me when it's done. It'll also notify me here when it's done. And that's it. So we are now officially done with editing an episode. All I have to do now is tweet about it probably tomorrow when I get a chance, and then announce it on Monday. Make sure to tag Steven in the tweet. Everything else is pretty much automated. It'll show up in iTunes and Google Play and everything like that already. So I'm going to close it up here, guys. Thanks very much for sticking with me this whole time. You've made this really boring process actually a little more enjoyable. So thank you for that. I hope you got something good out of it. I know, Calvin, you at least got the whole sync tracks thing. That's going to save you some time. And Phoenix, it was cool hanging out with you again, man. We're going to have to do this more. It's having the chat room like this is kind of like the old IRC days, in a sense. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And I think I'm friends with all you guys, so if you start to stream something out, I will try to jump in and say hi. Here's my headliner MP4 file. Okay, with that that's it for the day. Thanks very much, guys. You all have a good weekend now.